So, you're a professor at UIC. What has the last year been like?
Yeah, so there's like a lot of layers to that question, I think. So, crazy would probably be the one word answer, but more broadly, it's been super interesting to like identify the pros and cons of trying to teach through the pandemic, right? So I get this question a lot of like, how's teaching? Like, how's online learning? Do you love it, hate it? What's happening?
I bet you hate that question.
I hate that question because of this exact problem of there's just too much to say to people in like a short one-off like conversation, right? So, but we have all the time in the world now, so let's go. I'll start with the negatives and then we can end on a higher note. One of the like worst parts about teaching during the pandemic has been two things. First, I really enjoy being able to like be in a classroom and have that like physical connection with my students where I actually get to like see the like cogs start to like roll over and then start to like make these connections. So that's like one of my favorite parts about being a teacher. And I have lost a lot of that with online learning. A lot of students don't really feel super comfortable with like their cameras being on and Zoom calls, and I have students all over the world, so sometimes they miss classes, and that can be a little bit challenging.
Yeah.
The flip side of that is that we are challenging a lot of these long-standing pedagogical norms within.
Ooh, that's a big word.
Yeah. The ideas of teaching, right? How we teach, thinking about the way that teaching impacts our students and their lives. So that has been radically altered throughout the pandemic.
Yeah.
Before, especially with a lot of the older professors, they have a way that they've been doing this, and they've been doing it for 40 years, and they can't change their mind. But this forced them to change their mind on certain things.
Yeah.
So we've seen a rise in technology, which helps students kind of grasp some of these more complex ideas. And we've allowed students a little bit more flexibility in their own way of learning, right? So students can approach topics and research in ways that feel more organic to themselves because we aren't as focused on hitting deadlines because you have to have your paper in by class on Friday morning. So as long as you have it in, we can grade it. So that has been like a positive of it. The other negative of it is just physically seeing what it's done to the students, right? So college is an exciting time for like everyone.
Right.
And you grow up, you learn a lot about yourself, you learn a lot about what you're interested in, what your career might be. And I primarily teach freshmen and sophomores. That's a really, really important time period in a person's life. So I've seen these students miss out on that time, and that's been difficult as someone who like cares about their students to kind of watch.
A teacher caring about the
students.
I
know, right?
Good to hear.
Crazy. But yeah, so I've seen some positives and negatives on both sides of it. I get this question all the time, so it's just like so weird to try and conceptualize the way to answer it, because I'm happy that students are able to approach these ideas in new ways. Mm-hmm. I wish I could physically be there to help them and like be in the classroom, teach them the material that I'm super passionate about, and see them become passionate about it.
So do you think it was also just difficult because it was all at once? There was no like, at the beginning of this academic year, over the summer, we're going to train you to teach students how to learn online. It was like, just like all at once, right?
Yeah. And luckily, I've taught online classes before, so I had some background in it. It's still super crazy and different than anything I've done. But just like the very base of teaching online, I at least had some background in.
Yeah.
But even saying that, right? So the idea of recording the lectures rather than giving them live, and then having students who would have been in class but are now back home with their families in China, they can't watch the lecture live, so they watch it when they're awake, and then they email you, and I'm not awake then.
Yeah.
Well, I am awake, but I'm always awake. But
you are. I feel like you're always awake.
I'm always awake.
You're
but
like a mad genius.
Yeah, it's horrifying.
Surrounded by books.
But then trying to respond to the students in a time frame that's appropriate and acceptable is difficult, and that was a really strange aspect of it all. And And that was different than the previous online teaching that I've done before, where students, they weren't in class, but they were largely all in the state or something like that. Now I have students in England, China, India, Mexico, here. It's just trying to coordinate a path to getting them the information in an appropriate time frame so that they can digest it. That was the most challenging part for me.
Yeah, so this is requiring you as a teacher to use all these other types of skills and logistics and communication and coordination. Yeah.
Right, yeah. Wow. And it's a lot of these skills are things I'm happy I picked up, and that's kind of what I was going with, this idea of changing the way people have taught for long periods of time. A lot of these older professors they like teaching the way that they teach, but this has forced them to bring up like new ideas and new ways to approach classes. For example, some professors have a hard, I never use PowerPoint, I don't like visual aids, I just stand up and lecture. You can't do that anymore. So you need to have some visual aid for the students. So it's forced a lot of these professors to go out and make some visual aid or bring some primary sources into the class for the students so that they can physically interact in their own way. And I think that that's just a positive overall. So even though there was a lot of struggle, and I saw that struggle with my students and with the staff at the school, I think forcing people to reconsider the ways that they teach and the ways that they think about their own teaching as well as the department's teaching at large was like a huge benefit from this. Yeah.
So moving forward, do you think there's going to be like these hybrid learning scenarios or?
Yeah, interestingly enough, this is super weird. I'm actually teaching a hybrid class in the fall. So there will be half the students there, half of them don't have to be there. I'll have in-person meetings, but then there's another professor who's doing more of the online side of things, but then I'm also kind of helping with the online side of things. So it's a mess. It's trying to figure out all these logistics, like you said, of just figuring it out. So we'll know once we get there, but I think we're going to see a lot more of these hybrid classes show up. And I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and we were talking about how the world has changed with like labor, right? So work in general, and how so many places are now saying like, it's safe for you to come back, but just keep working from home. Like you can just keep working, doing your thing. In a lot of ways, I think we're going to see some of that in academia, where classes will transition into this idea of you can enroll in a class, or you could just stay wherever you are and enroll in online class. We have all these structures set in place because of COVID, so it's super easy and efficient. And we've proven over this last year that you still can teach online. So if students want to go that path, then they can.
So it's almost like it's catered even more to students of like, do you want your learning environment to be more remote and flexible, or do you want it to be more... Wow.
Right. And going back to the point about like how important this time period is for students, I would hope that most students, especially if they're 18, they've never lived on their own, I would encourage them all to like go to school, live in a dorm, get an apartment somewhere. Like grow up a little bit, become the person you want to be, and like learn and make mistakes, fail a little bit here and there, and like grow from it. I think that's super important. On that same note, I have students who are older than I am, and they're going back to school, and they have kids. And okay, for those people, they are an adult and they have children. They don't need to come to school at 10 in the morning for an hour class. If they can do it all online, they're just going to do it all online because they have other work and children and families. So in those cases, I think that there was this idea that online learning was like lesser before COVID. And I think we've proven that the education can still be strong and good and beneficial for our students, even if it's online. So.
And it can also be more accessible. Education can be more accessible to more people.
Which is like an incredibly important part within academia at large, both from physically being in the classroom, but then I'm sure we'll get to it with like research and travel. A lot of institutions don't have all like their collections digitized, and I found through COVID that there's been this like collaboration between schools to have students digitize what they can, and in collections that you can't digitize it or can't work with material like physically, having someone from that campus reach out and like work with you and source exchange, right? So I'll take pictures of some stuff or scan some stuff at UIC, and then someone in Berkeley will do the same and send them back to me, and we'll trade it. And any instance where you are making access to knowledge greater and wider, I think that's important.
Yeah.